From what we know about the prejudice of the times was that it was very rare for blacks to be able to purchase real estate. He owned land from sea to sound, and it really was one of a kind. It was very rare to see any place like that. It's overcoming odds. It's about determination, initiative, financial genius, and going against the tide. I'm Glen Bowman. I am professor of history at Elizabeth City State University, and I've become over the years kind of the unofficial historian of the university. And it's in that capacity is how I got to learn of Henry Clyde Hargraves. Hargraves was literally one of the leading black businessmen in the first half of the 20th century in Elizabeth City. He was just a mover and a shaker. When I started reading about the community's history, the black history in this area, which really hasn't been written about, Hargraves' name just kept coming up, and then with that connection with the Outer Banks real estate. That impressed me greatly. It impressed me because for that time, it was very difficult for black Americans in North Carolina in the Jim Crow South to find a way to become independent, self-reliant economically. Henry Hargraves invested a little less than $3,000 to purchase about 80 acres of Outer Banks real estate in what is now called Duck, North Carolina. And that property became the Hargraves Beach Resort. How Hargraves is related to ECSU is interesting in that the two business partners that Hargraves had were actually the president of what was at that time called the Elizabeth City State Colored Normal School. That today is now ECSU. Hargraves and whose partners were black. The fact is if Hargraves was not able to pass for white, I highly doubt that he would have been able to purchase that land in the first place, and we would never be having this conversation. What we know about the resort is that Hargraves started building almost immediately after gaining control of the property because they divided it into chunks, and I'm assuming that the chunks were based upon how much money each person put down. My understanding is that Hargraves had at least 30 acres, which was actually more than 1/3 of the 80 acres that was alleged that they had purchased. By about 1932, from my understanding, is it had 2 bathhouses, a dance hall, a restaurant, a hotel, and a pier that extended about 700 feet. That's a resort. That's everything you need. Food, housing, and entertainment, there you go. You have no other reason to go anywhere else. And what Hargraves did to attract the crowds is he would actually have a bus that would bus people into the beach resorts. And again, that's clever because again, people who wanted to go to the beach could not necessarily afford to have their own vehicles. So it was quite an enterprise because he was financially shrewd. He did it the Booker T. Washington way. He saved money, he was competitive in business, he was known for his reputation of being a man of integrity, and that got him that savings, which he then used to build this really was a beach resort. Segregation, yes, was not just about schools and about churches and about cemeteries and about healthcare. It was also about, of course, recreation. There were very few opportunities for blacks to enjoy the ocean. It really was one of a kind. It was promoted in the newspapers. There were articles about it in the Norfolk Journal and Guide, which is a black newspaper based in Norfolk. And so it did reach that kind of audience. People in Norfolk knew that if they wanted to go to a black beach, they could go. Through the mid-1950s, there were events held there. I don't know anything about the history of the fire, how it was caused, but I do know that it was burned down. Hargraves passed away in 1967. And I don't know what the efforts were to rebuild. There are gaps in my knowledge. There's always the issue of documentation. To piecemeal this back is not easy. That's a problem with doing history. It's a real life, feel good story because it's overcoming odds. It's about determination, initiative, and going against the tide.